Today I'm going to be looking at the top 5 mistakes that guitarists make, and I'll also give you some tips and advice on how to fix them and improve these mistakes. So number 5 is right hand organisation. So whether you're playing with fingers or with a pick, I often see guitarists, especially students, really looking at their left hand and not paying very much attention to what their right hand's doing. And that's because the left hand work is really difficult and it requires a lot of focus and attention. But the right hand part is also really important. So oftentimes I find that, say when it comes to playing a scale or some sort of melodic passage, that the fingers are just not working as fluidly as they could. I often talk about this in terms of right hand walking, where the fingers are alternating. Now clearly, if I'm going to be practicing and playing in this way, I'm going to be a lot more fluid than if I'm just playing with one finger. Now, oftentimes I'll see a student where they're just plucking through with one finger, whether it's the index finger or sometimes people play with the thumb. Now, the thumb can be a good tool for playing and plucking, especially when it comes to things like alzapua and wanting to get sort of a thumb kind of attack. But generally speaking, you're going to be limited how fast you can play and how smoothly you can play. So the second thing is I also find that arpeggio playing can be quite sloppy and a lack of organisation in terms of what fingers are going to be playing what strings. So I'd fix this by practicing right hand walking. And so doing any drills that requires your fingers to be alternating is going to be really important. Any scale that you do, I would be practicing multiple times each note playing with different fingers. So if I'm playing a C major scale, I might practice it, things like that. So sometimes I'll just be sitting there and just practice and get a student to play for like 30 seconds to a minute. I call the right hand like the engine room because it is the part of your playing that needs to happen and propels all your playing. You don't really want to be thinking about it. So in other words, it's not like you should be looking at your right hand a lot, but you should really grow to depend on it well and plan for it to work well before you actually come to playing a piece. The second thing I would also practice is just going to default, which I often talk about with my students. It's just getting your fingers, your index, middle and ring finger on the top 3 strings, on the plastic 3, 2, 1 strings, and get really comfortable with finding that. If I was to ask you to pick the guitar up now, put your fingers on default without really looking at your hand, could you do it? Could you find those things? Could you find those 4 strings if your thumb is playing your thumb? That would be definitely something I'd be working on, finding default. And from there, then you've already got sort of an element of organisation, because if I'm playing an arpeggio, my fingers are already there. So organisation of default and planting the strings, which means putting them down before you play, will really help to send you in that direction. So start thinking about and planning that. If you want to move into intermediate to advanced levels of playing, a lot more of this is going to have to happen, because there's elements in pieces where you just really have to know what finger's going to be playing what. Can't be sort of improvised or just guessed. And every time you come to it, you really won't be sure what you're doing. There might be mistakes that are happening and you might not even realize why. Oftentimes it's the right hand. My number 4 in top mistakes guitarists make is the left hand pressure. Left hand pressure. So I often find that guitarists are putting way too much pressure onto the string and pressing way too hard. You see this by just generally tense playing and people really squishing the guitar, and you can sort of see it up the neck and the arm and the face even. And I find that's really not necessary, because playing guitar is actually a subtle and light thing to do. Unless, of course, you're playing really heavy, fortissimo type things and strumming really hard. I still think that you still need to hold back your tension and your aggression towards the instrument, and really allow the guitar to play itself more. So I really think that as guitarists, as students of the guitar, we need to start looking at minimizing and optimizing the amount of pressure that you use. So how do we fix that? Well, firstly, I would say keep a low thumb, because the thumb that's low is going to help you with the curve of the fingers. And the curve of the fingers is going to give you more leverage of the actual finger and keeping the tips on the actual string. So that's the first thing, low fingers, which will help you with the curve. And then the other thing is keep your fingers really near the fret. And this is really important, because when you're pressing a string down near the fret, it's just going to utilize far less pressure than if your finger is at the other end of the fret. For example, I can pluck this G I can play it really lightly, same pressure at the other end of the fret. There's a middle way point where there's a bit of buzzing, and then I get close to the fret and it's really straightforward. I can also demonstrate this by just taking my thumb completely off, and I can still play it. How is it that that's possible? Well, it's because I'm also utilizing a little bit of the weight of the arm. So curve, low thumb, and you kind of get almost like a hook action. Sometimes I sort of talk about it in terms of if you're rock climbing, you're kind of utilizing the tips of your fingers, and that's where the power goes, and the weight of the arm is transported. And then basically just allowing the arm to kind of dictate that pressure. So there's two forces at play. Yes, there's an amount of squeezing, especially when you're talking about bar chords and lots of things going on. If the fingers are independent, it's going to help as well. If the fingers are stronger, it's going to be easier. But ultimately, if you could utilize a bit of that weight, that's going to help with the pressure as well. So near the frets, use the arm weight. Just the walking, I call this the finger ladder, is a really good one as well. Or you can also start with zero pressure and move towards more pressure, and try and find that threshold where you get the buzz. Once you get a buzz, you just have to press it just a little bit more. Okay, so when you see guitarists who have got that real, that ability to just look masterful and relaxed, and it's like they're not trying, they're utilizing that, all those things in their playing. My third mistake that I find guitarists make, and it's not entirely a guitarist thing, but it's definitely something guitarists do, and that's bad posture. So bad posture as in their back is relatively bent, their neck can be sort of like this. Whenever you see a guitarist who's sort of trying to see their fingers, you're going in the wrong direction, because guitar playing is quite a feel-based thing. And when I've got the guitar like this, you might be able to see my fingers, but I can't actually see the fretboard. I can only see the top of the fretboard, and then from there down, I can kind of work out where everything else goes. You should be able to play most things without looking. If I you should be able to sort of do things like that to get somewhere on the fretboard, but at least if you are staying in your open position, you should be able to feel your way through. So being more feeling based is going to help a lot, and keep the guitar higher. This is the thing. I see a lot of guitarists playing, way down here, with the guitar way down there. So what's going to happen there is you're not going to be able to utilize any of that weight. The guitar is really far away. Everything's low. So, ultimately the greatest power is going to come from keeping things near you, near your center of gravity. And that's why you see some guitarists playing like that. So I tend to either use a footstool, which is going to help my left leg raise, and then I immediately get this higher neck, which allows for good weight distribution, also a very easy reach up here, and also I get this really nice little lean of my right arm, which again, just use the weight of it rather than actually having to hold it up. So utilizing gravity, really big thing when it comes to holding a guitar properly. That will help you. You can have it on your right leg, and you put your right leg on the footstool, and that's pretty good too. You can cross your legs, which is not ideal, but I often do that as something a bit different. As long as the guitar is generally coming out a little bit, so it's not entirely like horizontal. People don't play guitar with the guitar straight across, because that just doesn't work. You need to have the guitar out a little bit in front, a little bit higher, and then you've got all this movement. The flamenco players often play it like this, but even the rock guitarists, they'll point the guitar outwards. There's still kind of an ergonomic aspect to that as well. But when it comes to playing electric guitar, it's a completely different sort of mindset and technique, because so much of the technique is helped by the amp, the pickups, whereas us Latin nylon fingerstyle players, we need to become the piano. We need to become the mechanism first. My number 2 common guitar mistake that guitarists make is practicing too fast. So this is again not an entirely guitar thing. This is not entirely a guitar thing, but I find that obviously being a guitarist and having guitar students, This is something I see a lot. And essentially that means that you should be practicing slower than how you perform. So when you perform, you're going to be playing at a certain speed. So oftentimes I'll ask a student to play something a bit slower, and they'll say, yeah, sure, I'll play it slower, and then they play at exactly the same speed. So that sense of time is very subjective. So how do we fix that? Well, use a metronome, basically. Use something external to remind you and to keep you in track in terms of how fast you're going. So get the metronome out and make it a best friend, because that's how you're going to become a proficient player. The metronome should be set at a tempo which provides some challenge, but not too much. So that challenge is going to keep you working hard at getting to the next phrase, but it also allows you to get through it, the whole piece. You should be able to get through the whole piece with the metronome, or at least a decent section of it. Once you've got that down at one tempo, it can then move to another tempo. But if you're practicing it too fast, you will never get those mistakes cleaned up. And it'll always kind of seem a little bit, messy. And there are players that are like that. They get to a point, but they always make little mistakes. Those little mistakes can be fixed and avoided by playing at the right tempo. And the right tempo can only be done with a metronome, or unless you're using like a backing track. But I think the metronome is really still one of the best tools for practicing. Finally, my number one mistake that guitarists make is lacking performance practice. Playing fingerstyle on Latin and Spanish guitar is quite difficult. It's quite a difficult thing to master, and it can take many years. And I find that students come to me having practiced in their bedroom, and then they kind of falter when it comes to performing it, whether it's to me or in a concert. And it's very frustrating, because the students will say, I'm standing really good at home. And I'm like, well, yes, but it's very easy to play when you're just playing for yourself. As soon as you apply some sort of pressure, anytime you put sort of pressure on, you are going to play differently. And that happens in any sort of performance scenario. Part of your practice should be performance practice. Practice performing in front of friends and family, but also practice recording yourself. And that could be a little bit of pressure that will sort of tell you, yes, this is working well. No, this part isn't so, programmed. Basically anything that's not really solid and programmed and practice slow and well organized, it's going to come under pressure, and some of the bolts will come off. So you need to know when that's going to happen, rather than put yourself in a scenario where you sort of feel embarrassed. So do some of the performance work, performance pressure, by recording yourself or playing it to someone, even little bits of it, and that's going to help a lot. I also like to do this thing called the 4 times rule, which is, you can set up little games, pressure games for yourself, where you're going to say, I'm going to play this passage 4 times in a row without making a mistake. But if I don't get to the 4th time, I have to start again. And you can increase that to more than 4 times. I find 4 times is a good one for me. And then you can really test yourself out, or do it with a friend, or do it with a practice partner, and see if you can put that pressure on. And if nothing else, what it does is it really hones your focus in. And that's a really important part of practice as well, is that focus and that ability to be really in that moment, rather than just, do my best, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to do after this. These are the sort of focus exercises that we really need to have in order to get to high levels of playing. And this is not easy stuff. It's not for the average person, So if you feel that calling to be a Latin and a classical or fingerstyle guitarist, and you understand that it's going to be a difficult road, well, you need to improve ability to focus and your ability to perform. So there are my 5 top mistakes guitarists make. And I think that, these are things that I've gleaned from my 30 years of teaching, and also my own practicing, my own playing, my own experiences. So I hope that if any of those resonate, hopefully you'll be able to find a way forward, and using some of my techniques and suggestions to improve and to get better at that groundwork. Certainly for me, I didn't come out of the blocks at age 20 being a virtuoso. I was a proficient player back then, and that was 30 years ago. But I've just constantly improved over time. And that's one thing you don't sort of necessarily see, is that, as a guitar player, you can constantly improve over time, so that, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you would be a better player, keep being a better player, if you utilize some of these techniques and recommendations that I give you. And obviously you'll find lots of it on YouTube. You go to my blog, latinguitarmastery.com, for lots more of my content and lessons. You can become an LGM member, and you'll get lots of perks and extra content. So I'd love to see you over there. But if not, see you next video, and thanks for supporting the channel, and I'll see you next time.